welcome. My name is Luann Pygott. Welcome to Sunday evening and to my ministry live. So I am going to sing a couple of Christmas songs for you today, and I'm going to read you a story. And I'll bet you think I'm going to read you a story about Christmas. I'm going to read you a different story in the Bible, but yet I'm still going to kind of tie it to Christmas. Everybody reads the Christmas story and bits of the Christmas story at this time of year, even me, last few years. Nothing wrong with that, but I'm like, I think I'm going to do something different today. And this came to my mind. And when God first brought this to my mind, I'm like, Lord, that's not Christmas. That's not Christmas. And it's like, it won't leave my mind. So apparently I'm supposed to do this anyway. So here we go. We're going to do this. I am titling this live that I'm doing today, The Chain Reaction. And I'm going to actually read you the story of David and Goliath. Not the story of Jesus in the manger. I'm going to read you the story of David and Goliath. And I have a whole reason for that. So I am going to, I know you know the story, but it's really kind of long in the Bible. It's really kind of long. So I'm going to go through it because I kept saying, well, God, because sometimes I just pull parts of verses and parts of the Bible and parts of chapters out. And, I'm not trying to rewrite the Bible, but, we don't read the whole Bible at one time. So I thought, God, I could skip some of this. And he kept saying no. Well, God, I could just skip like how tall he was. And then he said no. Every time I said, God, how about I skip the first part of the chapter? And every time I kept thinking, I'm going to skip over some of this. And I've done that with other things. So I kept hearing no, don't skip anything. And so I thought, okay, I'm not going to skip anything today, so you're going to get the whole story. And then I'm going to tell you kind of the theme behind this that has to do with the chain reaction. 1 Samuel 17, 1 through 54 is what I'm reading. Now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle, and they were gathered at Sukkah, which belongs to Judah, and encamped between Sukkah and Azekah. If I'm saying these wrong, I'm sorry. In Ephes Dammim, and Saul and the men of Israel were gathered and encamped in the valley of Elah and drew up in line of battle against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on the mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side, with a valley between them. And there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. I looked that up. That's about 9 feet 9 inches tall. He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. And the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze, and he had bronze armor on his legs, and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron. I looked that up too. All that stuff he was carrying weighed between 250 and 300 pounds, all his armor. This was a strong man. He had to just be strong to wear all this stuff. And his shield bearer, so there's another, you always see the pictures of David and Goliath. You see David and Goliath. He had a shield bearer. There was another person. They never draw this person in. He had a shield bearer that went before him. And I also read this, and they believed that the shield that he would have held, it was somebody that just could hold the shield. He said the shield would have been the size of a door to cover him. So all those pictures you see of David and Goliath should have another guy standing there with a shield the size of a door holding it. Should have that too. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let them come down to me." Now I read also online that what they were doing was sometimes a standard practice with some people who were going to war. And that instead of just the two armies coming together and everybody killing each other, sometimes they would decide to say, look, instead of just killing everybody, we're going to pick our top person and you pick your top person. And we will let them fight it out. And whoever wins, if you win, we will be your servants. And if we win, you will be our servants. And that way, there's not a lot of bloodshed. We won't kill everybody. So how's that deal? And so the thing is, the other side has to accept the deal. Well, he was doing this, saying, I am the chosen one to fight against you. Now you pick somebody to fight against me and we'll do our war this way. And then, but see, the reason they weren't answering is they knew they weren't going to win. They didn't think they could win against that giant. So they were like, we don't really think we want to fight it this way because we don't have a giant on our side. So he continued, Goliath did, if he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. And the Philistine said, I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. So instead of going to God and saying, what should we do? They were just very upset and afraid, oh no, he's going to kill us. Because they knew that within their own power, they could not defeat him. And they said, why should we even try to fight this battle? So they were just hanging out. And the army, the Philistine army, they didn't really want to have the regular type war because they didn't want to die. They said, we have this giant on our side. I often wonder how they get him on their side. Because he wasn't actually a Philistine originally. He was a giant from Gath. So he was from the, heritage of the people who were giants, which we know were born from this, what the Bible tells us, from the sons of God going into the daughters of men, marrying them, and had the children that they had were giants, but they were evil, which people believe that was the fallen angels that were fathering children. So it's interesting that all the children they had were ungodly children, even though they were angels who had probably stood in the face of God. But either way, he, I guess, had joined the Philistines. I often wonder, what did they do to convince him to join them? Did they give him riches? Maybe he just wanted to be honored as the champion. He wanted to be the hero of their, I don't know. I don't know what convinced him. Maybe he just because he was evil and wanted to fight and kill people. I don't know what motivated Goliath to join the Philistines. Because he could have said, I don't need you people, Philistines. I don't need you people. I can go get whatever I want. I'm Goliath the giant, right? So, but for some reason, he had lined up with them. Maybe they promised him his own palace and riches and something. But you would still think, wouldn't he just say, I'll go get my own riches? I don't know. But he was with them. Now, David was the son of an Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Judah named Jesse, who had 8 sons. In the days of Saul, the man was already old and advanced in years. The 3 oldest sons of Jesse had followed Saul to battle, and the names of his 3 sons who went to the battle were Eliab the firstborn, the next to him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest. From what I read online, they estimate he could have been between 13 and 15. I don't know how they come up with that. But it said he was a youth. So if he was a teenager. It says the 3 eldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. So he would go visit his brothers and go back to Bethlehem to shepherd the sheep. And I looked that up. From where they were camped, they actually know where this battle took place because it's mentioned where it's at. It was about 15 miles from Bethlehem. Hi, how are you doing? So, they said that was probably a 2-day journey for David to go back and forth to where they were camped out, where Goliath was challenging them. And it says for 40 days, the Philistine came forward and took his stand morning and evening. So for 40 days, he would come out and say, who's going to fight me? Because the Philistines wanted to win against the Israelites, but they did not want to fight the traditional way where they just went and all attacked them all. Because they would have some losses that way. But if they could get the Israelites to do it the way they were wanting to do it, there would only be one loss of a life. And they were assuming it would be whoever fought Goliath. But either way, it's like either Goliath will die in that one, or the opponent will die, and the rest of us will all get to live. We won't actually have to fight a battle, and there'll be no casualties on our side. So that's why they were wanting it to be a one-on-one battle, but nobody in Israel wanted to do it. And apparently they were not going to God and asking what they should do. So it says, and Jesse said to David his son, Take your brothers an ephah of this parched grain and these 10 loaves and carry them quickly to the camp of your brothers. Also take these 10 cheeses to the commander of their 1,000. See if your brothers are well and bring some token from them. So his father sent him and said, here's some food. Take them some food at the battle line, because they had been there for at least 40 days because they had been being challenged by Goliath for 40 days. It had been a month and a half. They were still just camping out there. And the father is like, go check on them. Take them something to eat. Bring back a token. So in other words, bring back something to remind me of them. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah. So this is how we know where it is, because it tells you. Fighting with the Philistines. And David rose early. Apparently just verbally fighting them. David rose early in the morning and left the sheep with a keeper and took the provisions and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the encampment as the host was going out to the battle line, shouting the war cry. So apparently they did this every day. Apparently the line, was in the middle of this valley, halfway. And he would come, Goliath, every day to the line, which was the midway, and he was giving this battle cry, the war cry. It says, Israel and the Philistines drew up for battle, army against army. So apparently they would march out every day and meet each other and stand there. And Goliath would say, send me your champion. And they would be like, we ain't got one. And then I guess they'd go back to their camps. They were doing is like going through the motions every day, but the Israelites weren't going to attack them. I don't know if it's because they didn't actually want to attack them or if they didn't want to fight Goliath. Because it was probably the Philistines that were coming to the Israelites to attack them. And the Israelites were probably looking at it, well, they're not really fighting us. They're just threatening us. And so we're not going to attack first. And then the Philistines were not wanting to attack because they wanted to do the one-on-one champion, fight against our champion thing. So nobody was fighting. Israelites were coming. Okay, what are they going to do today? Oh, they're just saying fight Goliath again. Bye. And so then they would kind of go back to their corners. And David left the things in charge of the keeper of the baggage. It's interesting they had a keeper of the baggage. Did you know they had a keeper of the baggage? Things strike me so funny sometimes. He left the things in charge of the keeper of the baggage and ran to the ranks and went and greeted his brothers. As he talked with them, behold, the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, came up out of the ranks of the Philistines and spoke the same words as before, and David heard him. Okay, so this is the first time he would have heard him. So he came through everybody in the army, came up to the front and said, send somebody to fight me. All the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were much afraid. So apparently they were doing this every day. I guess they thought maybe today it'll be different. Maybe today they're not going to, because they just kept running away and ignoring it. So I think they thought, let's go back again today. Maybe they'll do something different, but they never were. So again, they all ran off because they were afraid, because it's still, okay, it's still Goliath saying, send me somebody. And the men of Israel said, and they're talking to David, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. I find it interesting. I underline this because I want you to take note. He's saying this man, Goliath, he's come to defy Israel. Remember that's what they said. He's here to defy our country. To defy our country. Keep that in your mind. This is what they're telling David. This man Goliath is here to defy our country. Then it says, and the king will enrich the man who kills him with great riches and will give him his daughter and make his father's house free in Israel. In other words, you wouldn't have to pay taxes. So you were going to be tax-free. You were going to marry the princess and you're going to have all these riches, but nobody wanted it because they knew they were just going to die. So they're like, the king is going to reward somebody for doing this, but we don't have a giant and we don't have anybody that thinks they can win. So nobody's taking him up on it. And David said to the men who stood by him, what shall be done for the man who kills the Philistine and takes away the reproach of Israel? Or they just told him. But it's like, oh, wait a minute. Tell me again. Tell me again what you get. You get riches. You get to marry the princess. One of them. He had more than one daughter, I think. But you get to marry one of the daughters. And your father's house will be tax-free. So it's like he said, tell me the reward again. I want to hear what I get. Tell me what you get again. And listen to this line that David says. For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy? Okay, who did the brothers and the men of Israel say that Goliath was defying? It said he was defying Israel. It said he was defying their country. But listen to who David says. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? He doesn't say he's here to defy our country. He says he's defying the armies of the living God. This was something different to David than it was to all of them. This man was not here defying a country and the people of the country. He was here defying God and the people of God. That's who David saw that he was defying. And it says, and the people answered him in the same way, and telling him what you would get for being the person that defeated him. And so it shall be done to the man who kills him. Now Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men. And Eliab's anger was kindled against David, and he said, why have you come down? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption and the evil of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle. Okay, so first of all, he was all wrong. He didn't just come to see the battle. His father had sent him and told him to go. He didn't have evil in his heart. His brother was totally misjudging him, totally speaking evil and wrong against him. He did not have evil in his heart just coming to watch the battle. That was not what had happened at all. But he was like, why are you even here? So he was showing him total disrespect and didn't even know what he was talking about, and he was saying it in front of everybody. Everybody heard what his brother thought of him. Everybody heard his brother speak, saying, you're just here to watch the battle. And it was not even the truth. And David said, what have I done now? Was it not but a word? He's like, I didn't do anything. I haven't done anything that you said. I just asked a question. Basically, I just asked. Then he turned away from him toward another. So the person that spoke evil against him, it's interesting. He turned his back on him, turned away from his brother, and spoke to somebody else. And he spoke in the same way, and the people answered him again as before. So he's like, tell me again. Tell me again what you're supposed to get if you win this battle. When the words that David spoke were heard, they repeated them before Saul, and he sent for him. So apparently they said, there's a kid here, and he keeps asking. He keeps asking about what is the reward for killing the giant. He keeps asking. So Saul said, well, I send him here. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. So he says, your heart shouldn't fail because of this giant. You shouldn't be afraid because of this giant. Your servant, meaning he's saying me, your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. He's like, I'll do it. I'll do it. Why was he bold enough to do this? Because he was fighting for someone who was defying God, not fighting for someone who was just defying the country. And Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth. It's like, you're a kid, man. You're a kid. You can't do this. You're just a kid. And he has been a man of war from his youth. He's like, this giant, he has been a soldier since he was young. He's experienced. He's strong. He's tough. He's not just bigger than us. He's an experienced military soldier from the time he was young. You're a kid. You cannot go beat him. But David said to Saul, your servant, and he's talking about himself again, your servant used to keep sheep for his father. I think that's interesting. He said he used to, because he was still doing it. But I guess he also used to as well. And when there came a lion or a bear and took a lamb from the flock, I went after him and struck him and delivered it out of his mouth. Okay, he's talking about the past, not like yesterday. So this kid who was at this time probably at the most 15. Do you know anybody that's 15 years old? Think of a couple of young men that you know, or young boys that are 15. If a lion came to them and a bear came to them, would they be able to destroy them with the bare hands? David would have been just like those boys that you know that are this age. And this could have been, when he said, your servant used to keep sheep for his father, he's talking about this happening in the past. So he could have been 12 or 13 when a lion and a bear came and grabbed a sheep from the flock. But he says, I went after him and struck him and delivered it out of his mouth. He went after it and hit it and took the sheep away from it. Not with his own strength. It says, and if he arose against me, in other words, I went and hit him and took the sheep. And if he came back at me, I caught him by his beard and struck him and killed him. He's like, I just grabbed him and killed him. Your servant has struck down both lions and bears. Those are strong. I've never encountered a lion or a bear. I've not really even heard about many encounters with lions, but I've heard about people who get attacked by bears. Bears are strong. It says, and this Philistine, this uncircumcised Philistine, shall be like one of them. For he has, and he's saying this again, defied the armies of the living God. He's not saying he's defying Israel, our country. He's saying he is defying the armies of God, the children of God, the followers. He's defying God. He's not defying just the country. Everybody else that was looking at it, that this uncircumcised evil man, and the uncircumcision is representative of not being set apart to God, and it's representative of living an evil heathen life. And he is saying this evil man, he didn't say he's coming against our country. He said he's coming against God. But everybody else looked at it that he's coming against Israel. He's coming against Israel. He was coming against the God of Israel. And David did not have his eyes on the giant. He had his eyes on the God of Israel, who was really under attack, was God. And David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. Must have been an impressive story, because it says, and Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. Saul even knew that if this kid had killed lions and bears with his bare hands to save just a sheep, that God had to have anointed him and given them power to do that. And if so, that maybe he would use him to destroy their enemy before them. Then Saul clothed David with his armor. He put a helmet of bronze on his head and clothed him with a coat of mail. And David strapped his sword over his armor. And he tried in vain to go, for he had not tested them. Couldn't move. It was too heavy, because he was a kid. Then David said to Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not tested them. It's like, I haven't even tried to use this. I can't just go hope I can use it. I haven't tested this. So David put them off. So he had no human protection, no human weapons that you would normally use in a war. Then he took his staff in his hand, so he had a stick, and he chose 5 smooth stones from the brook. There is a brook in that valley. From what I saw online, there's still a brook there. He chose 5 smooth stones from the brook and put them in his shepherd's pouch. His sling was in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. There's a lot of people that say, why did he have 5 stones? If he thought God gave him the power and God was going to help him, why did he not just pick 1 stone? I've heard somebody say it was because he thought Goliath had 5 brothers. 4 brothers. He was one of 5 brothers. Could be. He could have thought that the Philistines, even if he killed Goliath, might still come after him. He had no 100% guarantee that God was going to use the first rock. It might have taken more than 1 to knock him down. Maybe there were just 5 there together. Stones. You know, if you're going to go fight a war and you have a gun and you're going to put bullets in it and you believe God is going to help you, do you just put 1 bullet? No, you're going to fill it. So maybe his pouch held 5 stones. So anyway, he had enough that if he needed to fight somebody else, he had enough ammunition. And the Philistine moved forward. So apparently he must have seen somebody coming. Probably saw him go to the brook. And he came near to David with his shield bearer. Remember, I told you that guy was there with that door-sized shield. We need to draw him in, those drawings of David and Goliath. Draw that guy with a shield. With his shield bearer in front of him. And when the Philistines looked and saw David, he disdained him. I mean, he looked down his nose at him like, are you kidding me? This isn't even a man. It's a teenager. For he was but a youth, ruddy and handsome in appearance. I think it's hilarious it says he was handsome. Like, that does that matter? Maybe Goliath was ugly. Maybe that's why he Look down his nose at him too. Oh man, this guy's handsome. I'm mad now. So it says, and the Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you have come with me with sticks? Remember, he had a staff in his hand. He had a stick. And the Philistine cursed David. Maybe he used that stick to hit the bear and the lion. I don't know. The Philistine cursed David by his gods. Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the beasts of the field. Then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. Notice he says to him, I'm going to cut off your head. He doesn't say, I'm going to hit you with a rock. He says, I'm going to cut off your head. Keep that in mind. And I will give the dead bodies of the host of the Philistines this day to the birds of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, and that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord saves not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand. Okay, notice something else he said here. I told you that the reason that I had read that they did this, send one person out to the battle and choose a champion and just you two fight, and if we win, you will be our slaves, and if you win, we will be your slaves. It's because they didn't want casualties on their own side. They didn't want to die. But what did David say? I will give the dead bodies of the host of the Philistines to the birds. Okay, wait a minute. He wasn't playing right. He said, I am not only going to kill you, we are going to kill the rest of you too. That wasn't the deal they were trying to make. They were trying to make you send one person to fight our one person. One of the two of you will die. Everybody else gets to live, but one of the armies is going to be the slaves to the other. That's not what David was saying. He said, no, I'm only going to kill you, Goliath. We're going to kill all the rest of you too. This is going to be significant as to why I'm telling you this story today. And I find this interesting because remember it said the Philistine moved forward and came forward and was talking to David. It says here again, when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to David, did he sit back down? Why did he arise again? It mentioned, then the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David. He must have come to talk to David and sat down thinking, I don't even need to stand to talk to this guy. I'm going to sit down, because it says right here, he arose. When the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag. Notice he did not even walk out there with a stone in his hand. He didn't have it in his hand. He didn't have it in his hand. He was not out there like, man, I better be ready. He had so much faith that God was going to deliver the ungodly into the hands of the godly. He didn't even have the rock in his hand. He didn't have it ready. Why didn't he have it ready? He knew God was going to use whatever he did, even if he didn't have it ready. He says he put his hand in his bag and took out a stone. This is while he's running. It says David ran quickly toward the battle. He put his hand in his bag, took out a stone and slung it and struck the Philistine on his forehead. The stone sank into his forehead and he fell on his face to the ground. That is not the end of the story. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone and struck the Philistine and killed him. There was no sword in the hand of David. Here's the rest of the story. Then David ran and stood over the Philistine and took his sword, which would have been enormous, and drew it out of its sheath and killed him and cut off his head with it. Remember he said earlier, I'm going to cut off your head today. He hit him with a stone. But he didn't say, okay, I got him. I got him. He said, I told him I was going to cut off his head. You know what cutting off the head, you say, oh, it's gruesome. I know. But you know what that's symbolic of? A lot of stuff in the Bible when it's talking about, especially in Revelation, and it talks about, it saw the beast with 10 heads. What that is symbolic of is 10 kingdoms. Your head, when the Bible talks about head, a lot of times it's talking about a kingdom. And when he tells the Philistine, I'm going to cut off your head, he's telling him, I'm cutting off your kingdom. I'm cutting off this kingdom of the Philistines. That's why he said, we're going to feed all your bodies to the birds. We are cutting off this kingdom right here. And he said, I will cut off your head. And he did that. He didn't just hit him with a stone and knock him down. He went and took a sword, cut off his head. He couldn't get up and recuperate that way. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. Why? David said, we're going to come kill you all. He didn't say, yes, I agree. We shall make you slaves. Like you said, Well, they didn't want to be slaves either, I'm sure. But they were like, okay, that kid that just killed the almost 10-foot giant said he's going to feed us to the birds. He didn't say he agreed. Let us be slaves, which we don't want to do either. Let's go. So it says they fled, and the men of Israel and Judah rose. Well, it's about time. Finally, they developed a backbone. With a shout, and pursued the Philistines as far as Gath and the gates of Ekron, which I looked up, and that's about 35 miles. So if it took David walking a couple of days to go 15 miles from Bethlehem to where this battleground was, 15 miles, they chased them for 35 miles. That's a long chase. That's a long chase. That's a long run. And maybe they could, since they were running, but good grief, that's a lot of running. They chased them for 35 miles on foot. So that the wounded Philistines, notice, they were having to fight and be defeated after all. The wounded Philistines fell on the way from Shaaraim as far as Gath and Ekron, and the people of Israel came back from chasing the Philistines, and they plundered their camp, so they got everything that they left behind. And this is a very interesting part of this story, too. If you've never heard this spoken of, I didn't come up with this, but I've heard this before. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. Okay, so he took Goliath's head. You say again, ooh, yeah, I know, this can be significant. He took Goliath's head, but he took the Goliath's armor and he put it in his own tent. Now, I don't know what exactly he did with that armor, but he took the head. Now, remember, David, and I never caught this before exactly, David didn't live in Jerusalem. He lived in Bethlehem. But it says he took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem. He didn't take it home. He didn't take it to Bethlehem. He took it to Jerusalem. Why? Because that was their capital city. And this giant that he had just killed was symbolic of somebody wanting to defeat their country. So he took it to his capital city. What did he do with it? It is believed that he buried it on a hill called Golgotha. And that it is even possible that Golgotha, Golgotha, I don't know if you remember this from the Bible, it even says it, Golgotha. The word Golgotha means place of the skull. What skull? Goliath's skull? Some people say there could have been caves there in the shape of a skull. Could have been. Could also have been Goliath's skull that was buried on that mountain. And it's also believed that possibly that the word Golgotha came from Goliath of Gath. Gol from Goliath and Gath from Gotha. Goliath is awfully close. Goliath, Goliath, Gotha, Goliath from Gath could have been. There's Goliath from Gath is up there, and they just started calling Golgotha, place of the skull. So it is possible and is believed by some people that Goliath's head was buried at Golgotha. What happened later in Golgotha? Christ was crucified on Golgotha, possibly above the head of Goliath. And we don't know that 100% for sure, but it's very possible. And like I said, I did not come up with this. I've heard this, so I'm just repeating it. But it makes sense. For this verse, God speaks in Genesis 3:15. When he told Adam and Eve, when they first fell, and he told them, and he was speaking to the serpent, and he was speaking to Adam and Eve, he was speaking to the serpent here. And he said, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. So he's talking to Satan, telling him, your offspring. Well, who is Satan's offspring? The Antichrist will be Satan's offspring. But I believe the giants were also kind of the offspring of Satan. I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring. He tells Satan he has offspring, and her offspring. Ultimately, Jesus was her offspring. We are all her offspring, but her ultimate offspring was the Son of God, and that's who he is really talking about. He shall bruise your head. Whose head? Satan's head. I believe that is speaking that he's bruising Satan's kingdom. Because remember, the head can also mean your kingdom. He's going to bruise your head. He is going to bruise your kingdom. But if Goliath was his offspring, he also could have been Satan's head, buried at Golgotha. And it says, he shall bruise your head and you shall bruise his heel. I often wondered why. Why does it say heel? Oh, I know he was nailed to the cross, and he was also nailed through his heel, so he's also nailed through the palm of his hand. Why does it say you're going to bruise his heel? Could it be that his foot, hanging on the cross, was not far from the head of Goliath, beneath him? I don't know. Possible. Very interesting. So, the reason I read this story and what had come to me, I still got a couple things to read and some Bible verse and some songs rather to sing. When I was thinking about Goliath, he was one enemy before the nation. Behind Goliath was an entire army of enemies. And I look at that as we can relate things to our life. When there is something before you, that there is an enemy you need to defeat. First of all, David defeated Goliath, but he did not do it in his own power. He did it under the power of God. Only the power of God. But, he had to put himself into it. He had to sling the stone. He had to pick up the sword, cut off his head. He had to put himself into that battle. But I do believe he did it with God directing him. If he did that at the direction of God, he didn't just defeat one enemy. He didn't just defeat Goliath. He defeated the whole army. If he had not done what he had done, following God and defeating the one enemy that was before him, that one enemy wasn't just one enemy. It was an army of enemies. So if God has something before you that is a battle that you have got to fight, you may not want to fight it. The whole Israelites didn't want to fight that battle. They're like, oh, we can't win this. They could have won it. They could have won it on day one if they had just had the faith that David had and just saw that the battle that was before them was not really against them, it was against God, and so therefore he would be on their side. If they had just said, I am going to be the one to go out and kill him, God would have given anybody that victory. Anybody. It wouldn't have had to been David. It could have been anybody in that army. With any method that he chose to try to defeat Goliath, God would have anointed it. Any of them could have done it, but they were too afraid and they wouldn't do it. And had it not been for David coming up to do it, the Israelites would have been wiped out eventually, because how long were they going to keep doing that? Eventually they were going to say, all right, we are so tired of this. It's been 40 days already. How many more days? Eventually they were going to say, they're not sending somebody, let's just go kill them all anyway. The reason I'm calling this the chain reaction is because I think if you do not defeat the one enemy that you see in front of you, if you do not let God use you to defeat whatever enemy is there, there's a bunch of more enemies coming. It isn't just one enemy coming against you. There's an army. You must defeat the battle and the enemy that God has placed in front of you. Because if you do not, it isn't just going to be one thing. It's going to be an army. And if you defeat the enemy that God has placed in front of you, I feel like you are going to defeat everything and everyone and every enemy that is behind that one you see. The one you see and the one thing you see has an army of stuff behind it. And if you defeat the one, you're defeating what you don't see. Defeat what you do see with the power of God enabling you to do it. You can't do it on your own. Defeat what you do see, and you will be defeating things you don't see. Don't defeat what you see, and you will also not be defeating things you don't see. It is a chain reaction. When you defeat what God brings you in front of to defeat, you're defeating everything behind it. If you don't do it, it's also a chain reaction. If you allow the enemy to overcome you, everything behind that is coming to overcome you as well. You can't say this is just one thing. I'm just going to let this one thing slide. I'm just going to let this one thing come. And if it brings me, whatever for a while, it's not going to just be that. It's a chain reaction. Either you defeat what God has brought to you, or it's going to defeat you, and there'll be more. Because there already is more. There's more behind the one thing you see. Defeat the one thing you see and don't say, I cannot do it. No, you can't do it. But it's not coming against you. It's coming against God in you. Let him use you to defeat who he wants to defeat. That's all you have to do. Let him use you. And he will be the one that defeats. I put in here Hebrews 10:10. It says, we have been sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once for all. When Jesus came and defeated the enemy, he didn't just defeat Satan that day. He defeated Satan and everything behind him. Everything. Jesus fought the one thing for us that God placed before him. He defeated Satan as our accuser and as our enemy. And when he defeated Satan, he defeated every army in Satan's tent. Every army that Satan has. He defeated everything. It says it was once. He did it once for all. You can defeat what is before you once for all as well, because Jesus did it for you and he is handing you the victory. James 4:7 says, submit yourselves therefore to God. That is vital. You cannot just say, well, I'm just going to go out and do anything. You have first got to submit yourself to God. You have got to be his army. Because this is what David said when he said that he is defying the armies of the living God. You have got to be in God's army first. Submit yourself to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Don't try to resist the devil if you have not submitted yourself to God, because if you're just going to try to resist the devil, he does not care. He does not care. But if you have submitted yourself to God, God is now on your side with you. Then if you resist the devil, he now cares. He doesn't care about you, but he cares about the power of God that is with you and in you. Submit yourself to God. Then resist the devil. He will flee from you, just like those Philistines did in front of the Israelites. So, let me see what I wrote here. Hold on. Okay, I said all that. I just wanted to make sure I said everything I intended to say. So I'm going to sing a couple songs, and they are Christmas songs, because I told you I would kind of tie this to Christmas, because when Jesus came, he was our sacrifice once for all. That Hebrews 10:10. We've been sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once for all. There you go. That's Christmas. There's the part about Christmas. So I'm going to sing a couple of songs. One of them is one I've heard it before. I've never played this before. It's called Good Christian Men Rejoice. I know you know it. It does not tell me what year it was written. It's an old song, though. I've never played it. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not all that great at playing it, because I just pulled this out the other day and thought, well, I have never played that song or sung that song. I do kind of know it. So let's sing it, because it's one I haven't done before. I'm going to sing it a little on the slow side, though, so I can kind of keep up with it. Good Christian men rejoice with heart and soul and voice. Give ye heed to what we say. News, news, Jesus Christ was born today. Ox and sheep before him bow, and he is in the manger now. Christ was born today. Christ was born today. Good Christian men rejoice with heart and soul and voice. Now ye hear this endless bliss. Joy, joy, Jesus Christ was born for this. He has opened heaven's door, and man is blessed forevermore. Christ was born to this. Christ was born for this. Good Christian men rejoice with heart and soul and voice. Now ye need not fear the grave. Peace, peace. Jesus Christ was born to save. Calls you one and calls you all to gain his everlasting whole. Christ was born to save. Christ was born to save. I didn't know all the verses to this. I'll tell you, I love that verse that says, now you need not fear the grave. Peace, peace. Isn't that what the angels said? Peace on earth, goodwill toward men. Now you need not fear the grave. You can have peace. Okay, this other song I'm going to sing is, I actually discovered this one kind of. I don't know if I'd ever heard it before or not. I discovered it last year. I sang it last year once. It's a really old tune, but they wrote some Christian verses to it. I mean, some Christmas verses to it that I had not heard. They are some good verses. So good, so powerful, so moving. And I'm like, why do I not ever hear this? I've never heard it on the radio. I've never heard anybody sing it. But I happen to know the tune. The tune is a really old tune called Londonderry Air. And you've probably known it. If you do, you've known it as Oh Danny Boy, which is kind of an Americana song. And I first learned it by this song called He Looked Beyond My Faults, which was taking that same Oh Danny Boy tune, and they wrote some Christian words to it. But then I find it last year in this hymn book. It's not one that was in my church, but it was just a different hymn book I had to happen to have. The same tune written to a Christmas version called I Cannot Tell. And I don't know if you've ever heard this, but the words are beautiful, and I pray that this song will bless you and that I can play it. I cannot tell why he whom angels worship should set his love upon the hearts of men, or why as shepherd he should seek the wanderer to bring him back, they know not how or when. But this I know, that he was born of Mary, when Bethlehem's manger was his only home, and that he lived at Nazareth and labored. And so the Savior, Savior of the world is come. I cannot tell how silently he suffered, as with his peace he graced this place of tears, or how his heart upon the cross was broken, the crown of pain to 33 years. But this I know, he heals the broken-hearted and stays their sin and calms their lurking fears and lifts the burden from the heavy laden. For yet the Savior, Savior of the world is here. I cannot tell how he will win the nations, how he will claim his earthly heritage, or satisfy the needs and aspirations of East and West, of sinner and of sage. But this I know, all flesh will see his glory, and he shall reap the harvest he has sown. And some glad day his sun will shine with splendor, when he, the Savior, Savior of the world, is known. I cannot tell how all the land shall worship, when at his bidding every storm is still, or who can say how great the jubilation, when all the hearts of men with love are filled. But this I know, the skies will thrill with rapture, and countless voices then will join and sing, and earth to heaven and earth will answer. At last the Savior, Savior of the world is King. And this I know, he heals the broken-hearted, and stays our sin, and calms our lurking fear, and lifts the burden of the heavy laden. For when the Savior, Savior of the world is here, and this I know, flesh shall see his glory, and he shall reap the harvest he has sown. And some glad day his sun will shine in splendor, when at last the Savior, Savior of the world is King. Oh, that is such a powerful and comforting song. I pray that blessed you. I have just a couple of more verses. Hebrews 2:14. Since therefore the children share flesh and blood, he himself likewise, meaning Jesus, shared the same things, so that through death he might destroy the one who has the power of death, that is, the devil. He came and he fought the one battle, the one enemy. He fought the one that was before him, and it defeated everything in his wake. Through death, he destroyed the one that has the power of death. He destroyed death with death itself. We will still die, but we will not remain dead. We will rise again. Revelation 12:10 says, and I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, and the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. The enemy who is accusing you day and night, through Christ who came and sacrificed for you, he's been thrown down. And his attacks are of no effect, because your champion has won for you. And all you have to do is what David did: stand before the battle, take whatever's in your hand that God has given you, and throw it at the enemy. And God will defeat him. And it will be a chain reaction to defeat everything that's in the wake of that enemy in front of you. And it is not something that is an enemy against you and your land and your family and your country. It is an enemy that's coming against the children of the living God and against God himself. So let him win the battle for you. May you be blessed this week. Until next week, have a good evening. Bye.